Have you ever been alone in the wild, miles from civilization, and felt a shiver down your spine, as if something was watching you? Maybe it was the rustle of leaves, or a distant sound that just didn't seem right. Tonight, I'm going to take you deep into the heart of Alaska, where the wilderness holds secrets that are darker and more terrifying than anything you can imagine. These aren't just stories. They're real accounts from people who've faced the unimaginable and lived to tell the tale. Story 1. Lone Stalker on the Iditarod Trail. I had always prided myself on being a seasoned outdoorsman. I'd lived in Alaska for most of my life and considered myself well-versed in surviving the harsh, untamed wilderness. But what happened on the Iditarod Trail still chills me to my core. Even now, it was late February, the season when darkness falls quick and heavy over the Alaskan wilderness. I'd been dog-sledding along a remote section of the trail, miles away from any town or village. This was nothing new to me. I'd trekked this path countless times over the years. But this night something was different. The snow had a thick, suffocating quality that made every sound feel muted. My team of dogs had been uneasy since we set off that afternoon, pulling slower than usual, ears flicking nervously. At first, I chalked it up to the cold, but after we hit the deep woods, their behavior became harder to ignore. Every now and then, they'd all stop abruptly, their heads snapping toward the trees like something was watching us. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, just the endless stretch of blackened spruce trees, heavy with snow. Then, just after dusk, I started hearing it. At first, it was faint, so faint I thought maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on me. But it persisted. It was the sound of crunching snow, distinct footsteps coming from somewhere behind me. I stopped the sled, my heart pounding in my chest. The dogs were dead silent now, which was unsettling in itself. I turned around slowly, my breath fogging up in the bitter cold. There was nothing there. The trail behind us was empty. But the feeling of being watched was undeniable, like a cold hand resting on the back of my neck. I tried to shake it off. I mean, this was Alaska. There were plenty of animals out there, right? But something about those footsteps didn't feel animalistic. They had a rhythm to them, a human rhythm, and they were deliberately spaced, as if someone or something was trying to follow me without being seen. I forced the dogs to move forward, picking up the pace as the darkness thickened. But the footsteps only grew louder, closer. I stopped again, grabbing the rifle from the sled. This time, I called out into the trees. "Who's there?" My voice echoed, swallowed quickly by the dense forest. Nothing but silence. Then, suddenly, a low whistle pierced through the night air. I swear, my blood turned to ice in that moment. It was a slow, eerie tune, like someone was whistling a lullaby just behind the trees. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but it caught nothing but snow and shadows. The whistling continued, closer now, impossibly close. I didn't wait to find out what was making that sound. I whipped the sled around and forced the dogs to bolt forward, faster than I'd ever pushed them before. The whistling never stopped. It kept pace with us, like whatever was out there knew the woods better than I did, like it could navigate the darkness as easily as I could breathe. We rode through the night, and the whistling followed me the entire way, never fading until, at last, I saw the faint lights of a small checkpoint in the distance. As soon as we reached the outskirts of the camp, it stopped. The dogs collapsed, panting hard, and I nearly fell to my knees from exhaustion and fear. I told the locals what I'd heard, and they exchanged uneasy glances. One of the older men pulled me aside and said quietly, "You probably encountered a whistling man. Some say it's a loner who roams the woods, watching travelers. People have claimed to hear him on the trail for years. No one ever sees him, but the whistle? It never leaves you." I haven't been back on that stretch of the Iditarod since. And to this day, when I hear a faint whistle carried by the wind, my blood runs cold, and I'm taken back to that dark, lonely trail, wondering what was following me and why it never showed itself. Story 2. The Glowing Eyes at Savage River. This happened back in 2016. I was hiking the Savage River Loop near Denali National Park. It's a gorgeous area, pristine, untouched, but it's also isolated. You don't run into many people out there, and the wilderness feels like it's pressing in on you from all sides. It was early summer, and I'd set out alone to spend a few days camping along the river. My first night was peaceful enough, with the distant sound of water rushing by my campsite. The second night, though, was when things got strange. Around midnight, I was sitting by my fire, half asleep, when I heard a low, rustling sound coming from the underbrush. At first, I figured it was just a small animal, maybe a rabbit or a fox. I wasn't too worried, but then the sound grew louder, heavier. Something bigger was moving just out of sight. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it toward the noise. The beam cut through the trees, but I didn't see anything at first. Just blackness. I waited, straining my ears. The noise had stopped. I told myself it was probably a moose, or maybe even a bear, though the thought of that made me grip my bear spray a little tighter. Still, I couldn't shake this gut feeling, this sense of wrongness, that something was watching me. Just as I was about to turn back to the fire, I caught a glimpse of something in the distance. Two glowing orbs about eye level with me, reflecting the light from my flashlight. My heart skipped a beat. They were eyes, definitely eyes, and they were watching me unblinking. Now, animals' eyes can reflect light, sure, but these didn't move. They just stayed fixed on me, staring. I yelled, hoping to scare off whatever it was, but the eyes didn't flinch, didn't waver. They just kept staring. My heart was pounding in my chest so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed a rock and chucked it toward the trees, hoping to at least scare whatever was away. That's when the eyes blinked, slowly, and vanished into the darkness. I stood there, breathless, for what felt like an eternity. No sounds came from the woods, no movement, but the sense that something was still out there, watching me, was suffocating. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with my back to the fire, facing the woods, rifle in hand. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of a leaf set my nerves on edge. But the eyes never returned. The next morning, I packed up camp and hiked back to my car as fast as I could. When I got to the trailhead, I ran into a park ranger and mentioned what I had seen. He listened quietly, then nodded and said, "We get reports like that sometimes. People seeing eyes out there, things that just watch." He didn't offer any more details, just a knowing look that sent a shiver down my spine. To this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was just an animal. But those eyes, they felt intelligent, like something that wasn't just curious, but calculating. I haven't been back to Savage River since. Something about that place feels off, like it's hiding secrets better left untouched. Story 3. Cabin in the Talkeetna Mountains. In the summer of 2018, I decided to venture deep into the Talkeetna Mountains, an area I'd only explored once before. This wasn't a popular hiking spot, too remote, too rugged, but that's exactly what drew me to it. I wanted solitude, to be surrounded by nothing but the raw, untamed wilderness. I got more than I bargained for. I'd been trekking for 3 days when I stumbled across something that wasn't on any map. It was an old, dilapidated cabin, tucked away in a dense patch of trees. The wood was weathered, the roof partially caved in, and the windows were nothing but gaping holes. It was clear no one had lived there in a long time. Curiosity got the better of me. I approached cautiously, the undergrowth crunching under my boots. As I neared the cabin, I noticed the air around it felt wrong. It was colder, almost unnaturally so, like the sun had no power here. The forest, which had been alive with the sounds of birds and insects just moments before, had gone eerily silent. I stepped up onto the porch, the old wood groaning under my weight. The door hung ajar, its rusted hinges creaking as it swayed slightly in the breeze. Inside, the cabin was dark, musty, and reeked of decay. The floor was littered with debris, old tools, broken furniture, and something that made my stomach turn: animal bones. Small, brittle, and scattered everywhere, like something had been feasting in there. I felt a sudden urge to leave, but before I could turn around, I noticed something else. On the far wall, barely visible in the dim light, was a message scrawled in what looked like charcoal. It was crudely written, the letters shaky and uneven, but I could still make out the words: "Do not stay the night." A shiver ran down my spine. I backed out of the cabin, my heart pounding, But as I did, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, movement inside the cabin. I froze, peering back into the darkened interior. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, but then I saw it. A figure, hunched and twisted, lurking in the far corner. It didn't move like a person. It was too slow, too deliberate, almost as if it were in pain. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette, the vague shape of something humanoid, but not quite right. I bolted. I didn't care about my gear or the trail. I just ran, crashing through the underbrush, not daring to look back. I could feel eyes on me the entire time, feel something trailing me just out of sight, just beyond the trees. I didn't stop running until I reached a clearing, gasping for breath, drenched in sweat despite the cold air. I set up camp that night far from the cabin, though I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that figure, feel its presence, as if it had followed me, as if it was waiting for me to close my eyes. I left the mountains the next day, cutting my trip short. I never told anyone about the cabin, not really sure if they believe me. But one thing I know for certain, I'll never go back to the Talkeetna mountains. Whatever was in that cabin, it wasn't human, and I have a feeling it's still there, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to stumble upon it. Story 4. Shadow on the Dalton Highway. I was driving the Dalton Highway late one October night, a route notorious for its isolation and treacherous conditions. I was hauling supplies up to Prudhoe Bay, making a run I'd done dozens of times before. The road was pitch black, and the only light came from my truck's headlights cutting through the thick fog that had rolled in off the tundra. Somewhere between Coldfoot and Dead Horse, I began to notice something odd in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just the darkness playing tricks on me, but then I saw it clearly. Another set of headlights way back in the distance. They were far off, but unmistakable. I kept my eyes on them, half relieved at the thought of another vehicle on this desolate stretch of road. But as the minutes ticked by, those headlights didn't seem to get any closer. It was strange. Out here, you either pass someone or they passed you, no lingering in the middle. The lights just hovered there, always at the edge of visibility, never coming closer but never fading away. The fog thickened, making it harder to see anything around me. I kept glancing at the mirror, and that's when I noticed something even stranger. The lights weren't just behind me anymore, they were above me too. Two faint orbs of light, high in the air, like something was floating above my truck. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the road, but the unease gnawed at me. It was as if the lights were following me, matching my speed perfectly. I started speeding up, pushing the truck faster than I should have on those icy roads. The lights followed. I was gripping the wheel, so hard my knuckles turned white. I couldn't explain it. There was nothing that should be able to keep pace like that. Not in these conditions. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was seeing, but the fear was overwhelming. Then, the radio crackled to life, which was odd because I'd turned it off miles back. But instead of music or static, it was a voice, garbled and low, barely audible. It sounded like someone was whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. Just this constant, indecipherable muttering. It sent chills down my spine. I turned the radio off completely, but the whispering continued, now coming from somewhere inside the cab of the truck. It was all around me like it was in my head. I started shouting, trying to drown it out, but the voice only grew louder, more insistent. I felt something brush against my neck, cold like icy fingers, but when I looked, there was nothing there. The lights above me flickered, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw a shadow pass in front of them. Something massive, with wings that seemed to stretch out into the fog. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I don't remember the next few miles. All I know is that when I finally pulled into the truck stop at Dead Horse, I was shaking uncontrollably, drenched in sweat despite the freezing cold. I jumped out of the truck, half expecting to see something in the sky or hovering over the road, but there was nothing, just the silent, empty tundra. I didn't tell anyone at the stop about what happened. I didn't want to sound like I'd lost my mind. But that drive changed me. I've driven that road hundreds of times since, but I never, ever drive it at night anymore. And I always make sure the radio stays off. I don't ever want to hear that whispering again or see those lights in my rearview mirror. Story 5. Descent into the Glacier Cave. In 2019, I was part of a small team exploring the rapidly melting glaciers in the Kenai Peninsula. Our goal was to document the changes and map out newly exposed areas. It was supposed to be a straightforward expedition, but what we encountered, well, it's something I still have nightmares about. We'd set up camp near an ancient glacier that had receded significantly over the last few years. On the second day, we discovered an opening in the ice, a cave that had been hidden for centuries, now revealed by the melting glacier. It was a rare find, and despite the ominous feel of the place, we were excited to explore it. The entrance was narrow, just wide enough for us to squeeze through, and once inside, the temperature dropped sharply. Our headlamps cast eerie shadows on the ice walls, which glistened with an almost unnatural blue light. The deeper we went, the more the sound of the wind outside faded, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the glacier itself. It was as if the ice was alive, groaning and creaking under some immense pressure. About an hour into our descent, we stumbled upon something unexpected, an old piece of equipment, partially frozen into the ice. It looked like it had been there for decades. It was a rusted, battered ice axe, the kind used by mountaineers back in the early 20th century. But that wasn't the unsettling part. Near it, embedded deep in the ice, was something that looked disturbingly like a human skull, half visible through the translucent ice. We stood there, staring at it, trying to make sense of how it could be so deep inside the glacier. But then we heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping, like something was beating against the ice from deep within the cave. It wasn't just a sound. We could feel it, vibrating through the frozen walls, through our bones. One of my teammates, Tom, decided to press on, convinced we were on the verge of a major discovery. The rest of us were hesitant, but we followed him deeper into the cave. The tunnel narrowed, forcing us to crawl on hands and knees, the ice closing in around us. The thumping grew louder, more frantic, and the air became unbearably cold, freezing our breath before it even left our mouths. We finally reached a chamber, a wide open space where the ice seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. In the center of the chamber was a dark hole, a shaft that plunged down into the depths of the glacier. The thumping was deafening now, coming from that abyss, as if something massive was trying to break free. Suddenly, Tom let out a scream, scrambling back from the edge of the hole. He was pale, shaking, his eyes wide with terror. He kept babbling about seeing something down in the dark, something that shouldn't be there. We tried to calm him down, but then we all heard it, a voice low and guttural, echoing up from the shaft. We didn't need any more convincing. We turned and bolted, dragging Tom with us, the thumping following us, growing louder, angrier. The tunnel seemed to close in, the walls of ice pressing against us as we clawed our way back to the surface. When we finally burst out into the open air, the sky was darkening, the wind howling around us. We didn't stop running until we were back at camp, gasping for breath, the terror still gripping us. We left the next morning, abandoning the expedition. We never reported what we found, not officially. Who will believe us? But that glacier, there's something inside it, something ancient and furious, trapped beneath the ice for who knows how long. And every time I think of that place, I wonder how much longer it will stay trapped. So there you have it. The eerie whisper of an unseen stalker on the Iditarod, the haunting eyes that watch from the shadows along the savage river, and the nightmarish encounter deep within a glacier's icy tomb. These are not just tales to scare you. They are chilling reminders of the untamed and unforgiving nature of the Alaskan wilderness. Each of these stories leaves us with the unsettling realization that in the vast, remote corners of our world, there are still things we can't explain and might never escape from. As you lay in bed tonight, safe within the warmth of your home, remember that the wilderness is still out there, dark, silent, and full of unknowns. If you ever find yourself in the remote wilds, keep your wits about you. And if you hear a whistle, see something out of the corner of your eye, or feel a presence you can't quite explain, run. Because some mysteries are better left unsolved.